Hello. I absolutely love Portuguese, especially Portuguese from Brazil. So recently I started learning Portuguese in addition to learning Spanish, which is kind of my main shtick, mostly focusing just on immersion, just on reading and listening. I'm not speaking or anything like that yet, but I just thought I would go through what I have been enjoying in learning Portuguese. If you are learning Portuguese from English, you haven't learned Spanish, these are potentially a little bit more intermediate resources. If you already know Spanish, then you can pretty much jump into intermediate plus resources. So the primary things that I have been using are podcasts. There's a podcast called Slow Portuguese with Alice Ferreira, and this is a podcast Again, I keep drawing parallels to Spanish, but if you have used Cuéntame in Spanish, this is almost exactly the same type of podcast. So the format is that she first tells a story very, very slowly and then repeats it at more of a normal speed. So this one I find really simple to just listen to. There are only 20 episodes, I believe. So this is, a rare thing where I will probably finish this podcast, and hopefully when I have finished it, I will be able to move on to other things because I don't enjoy this one immensely, but it is really simple to listen to without seeing the Portuguese written, because that is kind of the catch of going from Spanish to Portuguese, is that written, it is extremely similar, but the pronunciation is obviously wildly different, so it can be really difficult to understand when you're just listening. But yes, this is a really, really good kind of starter-ish podcast. The other one is Fala Gringo by Lenny, maybe. And this one, I really, really enjoy this podcast. It is more on the intermediate side, and so this one is a lot easier for me to understand when I read along with the transcripts. I really enjoy this one, and I also like that it focuses on topics that I find a little bit more interesting, not so much like beginner language learning topics like going to a cafe or whatever. Like, he talks about politics, about current events, social issues. Like, I think the second episode maybe is about is there xenophobia in Brazil? Like, he's not afraid to jump into interesting topics right off the bat, which I greatly appreciate. So then the rest of these are native things that I am just kind of watching or listening to and getting what I can. So on YouTube, because I am super immersed in the book world, because I am a reader, I have found several channels that talk about books or e-readers, just the general book community. And so I find these relatively easy to understand because I'm familiar with what they're talking about. So if that is you also, then these 3 channels might work well for you. Otherwise, then I would search for something that you are super familiar with, whether that's sports or computers or whatever the case might be. So 2 straight up booktube channels are Sabrinna Talks and Palavras radioativas maybe. And these do book reviews, wrap-ups, reading vlogs, videos about e-readers, stuff like that. carolfcr art is another channel that does talk about books, also talks about technology, iPads, art supplies, and stuff like that. A little bit more broad topic channel. I'm pretty sure all of those have Instagram accounts as well. On YouTube and Instagram as well, Izaparle is a language YouTuber, Instagrammer. Then on Instagram, rafaellatuma, animator person. They make animated funny videos from different audios and different little cartoon drawing posts, and they're very funny when I can understand them. And I found them through an animated drawing that they did of Rebecarandrade, and definitely recommend following her as well. And then from her, I have followed several different sports related Brazil or like gymnastics related Brazilian accounts. So it was very fortunate that she was an absolute superstar at the Olympics right when I was really getting into studying Portuguese. So then for reading, I have been using my screen reader on my phone or iPad a lot for Portuguese because I don't have access to as many Portuguese audiobooks. Partially, I don't think they are quite as popular in Portuguese as in English and Spanish. And also, I just, am not in a country that would have a lot of them regardless. But the built-in screen reader for accessibility purposes on iOS is really quite good. It does, still sound a little bit like a computer, but it's not bad at all. If you didn't know, you can pick your voice. So if you don't like the built-in voices, there are a whole bunch of different ones. There's not a ton for Portuguese, but for some languages, there are tons. Yeah, so that has been really helpful for reading books because then I can, again, it's really important for me to, as much as I can, listen to it in addition. So when I'm reading an article or a book or whatever, I definitely want to hear how it sounds as well. So speaking of reading articles, the website nexo, I don't know how they say it, but that is where I have started reading articles from. I just recently started using this. But again, you can read the article, have the screen reader also read it to you while you're reading along. And then other than that, I have just been getting ebooks and trying to read them. I'm moving very, very slowly. There are some audiobooks on Storytel, which I already use extensively for Spanish and a little bit for English, but there are some on there, like especially classics, like Little Women is on there. I think Pride and Prejudice in Portuguese. So I really need to listen because I think if I am accustomed to the story, I think I could survive listening. But so that's another thing that I will be using upcoming. So obviously these are just resources that I will be starting out with. I'm sure I will be encountering many, many more things, but if you have recommendations, definitely leave them below and I will see you in the next video.